Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We start with a chapter, a very important chapter on coordination and response. This is O-Level Biology 5090 and this is chapter 11. And we'll be referring to a number of structures which I'm just going to be telling you in the syllabus. As I always ask you to have a look at the syllabus before you start a chapter, and then you have a look at the syllabus once you have revised the chapter. So this chapter is divided into three major portions in which we've got to study the nervous system, the diagrams of the central nervous system, the different parts of the brain, the cerebrum, cerebellum, pituitary gland, hypothalamus, medulla, and then the functions of the above structures in terms of coordinating and regulating body functions, the fact that you touch something hot and you withdraw your hand immediately. Then we have the structure of the eye, and that is these three components, which I will talk separately in a separate video. And then the neurons, the different types of neurons, and the reflex action, which is again these two parts. So this and this part is interconnected. So this is A, B, C, then D, E, F is the eye, which I will talk separately in a separate video. And then G and H is sort of interconnected with the A, B, C. Then we have the last part, which is the hormones part. So we talk of two types of coordination. Number one is the nervous coordination. Nervous coordination means, like, you know, when you walk and you step on something, on a nail or something, and you immediately wince. That's the nervous coordination. But then there is a hormonal coordination as well. You see, we need hormones to keep you intact, in fact. You eat something, the food is digested, your blood glucose level rises. We need to bring it back to normal. So just like we talked about negative feedback, you enter a room, this room is very cold, and your temperature needs to be maintained at 37. So we have a number of phenomena occurring, and that is vasoconstriction and vasodilation. But here we're talking of two main different coordination roles. One is the nervous role and the other is the hormonal role. Like, for instance, on a cold day, you drink a lot of water. Well, you need to pass out more urine because your blood volume needs to be maintained. So the hormone ADH is going to ensure that you pass this water out in the form of urine. Similarly, your blood glucose level rises, insulin is released. So we're going to be talking about a lot of hormones here. So what are hormones, and what is the role of hormone insulin, which is the role of the hormone adrenaline in a very fearful situation, panic situation, something anxious situation. You're bunking a biology class and there you see me and, well, you've had it. Then you're going to be starting to be releasing a lot of adrenaline because it's going to be very stressful. And that is not going to be a very nice day for you, I can assure you. So nervous and hormonal control. So we're going to be talking about the hormones. Maybe there's another video, or maybe we have 3 or 4 videos on this. I will see as I go along how long the videos are going to be. So we start with the chapter now. As you can see in this diagram, there is a central nervous system which we call the CNS. The central nervous system is just made of the brain, which is in your skull cavity. So you've got the skull and you've got the brain inside it. So that's a limited space that you have. So the brain, and then we have this continuing as the spinal. Yes, the brain will continue as the spinal cord, and the spinal cord will go right up to the tailbone, and the brain is covered in the skull, which is the bony part and the skull, and then the spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column. That's why we call vertebrates. Vertebral column is the vertebrae which are joined together to form the channel which contains the spinal cord. So the brain and the spinal cord are called the central nervous system. Then the peripheral nervous system is made up of the cranial nerves, which are in the brain, the optic nerve and the auditory nerve. Audio means hearing. And then the spinal nerves. So the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, and then we have the sensory organs, which are the eyes, nose, tongue, ears and skin. So not that we will be asking you these names, but this is called the peripheral nervous system. Well, the word periphery makes sense. central, the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system is made up of mainly the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. The cranial nerves will be the ones which are inside the cranium or the brain, like the eyes and the ear, which go direct information into the brain. And the spinal cord, of course, will be finding all these nerves which are going to the different parts of the body, the ones going to the arms, the ones coming out here, the ones coming out here and going into the legs, and the ones coming out here and going into the legs. So these are all these spinal nerves. Spinal nerves will be two types: sensory, which are carrying sensations to the spinal cord, and the information is going to the brain. And then the motor nerves. So there are two types. Number one, we said motor. First I said, sensory. And then I said motor. So sensory, which carries sensations; motor, which carry impulses to, very easy to remember, M motor, M muscle, and number two, glands. So motor neurons will go to either muscles or glands. Sensory neurons will be carrying impulses from the sensory organs, which is the eye, nose, tongue, ears, and skin. So I've just given you an overview of the entire system, the central nervous system, and then I will elaborate more on this as we go along. Now let's look at reflex action. A reflex action is an automatic response to a stimulus. So for instance, there's a pin lying on the table, and somehow your hand touches that pin and it pricks the pin. So first of all, we talk of the stimulus. Then we talk of a receptor. Receptor means the one which is going to receive this stimulus. Maybe it's something hot, so temperature receptors. If something painful, pain receptors. If there's something pressure, pressure receptors. So you would have a stimulus, then you would have a receptor in the skin, then you would have a sensory neuron. And the sensory neuron enters through the dorsal root. And the dorsal root ganglion contains the cell bodies of the sensory neuron. And then this sensory neuron synapses with another neuron which is called the relay neuron. And then the relay neuron synapses with a motor neuron. Now there's a very beautiful diagram showing you the different colors. And this passes out of this part is called the ventral root, and this part is called the dorsal root. Root means the branch which is coming out. And this, of course, this whole thing, this figure of 8 is the spinal cord, which is inside the vertebrae or the vertebral column. So I wanted to just know these names because I'm going to go into details and explain to you what is a neuron. And then, of course, the motor neuron goes to an effector, which could be a muscle or it could be a gland. So effectors can be either muscles or glands. So in this situation, what we're talking about is, we said there's a stimulus, then we said there's a receptor in the skin, then we said there's a sensory neuron. So number 1, number 2, number 3, and then there is fourth, a relay neuron, and number 5th is a motor neuron, and number 6th is the effector or the muscle. So in any reflex action, this is the pattern that we are going to see. So you're going to pause the video here, you're going to have a look at it, you're going to draw it in your copies, and you're going to label these 6, and then we will see how we go into details about the neurons. Now, what are neurons? Neurons are specialized cells that conduct electrical impulses. Please do not say messages, it's not an SMS. Electrical impulses through the body, and a nerve is a bundle of many nerve fibers enclosed within a protective sheath. So nerve fiber, nerve, these are the words that we use a lot, and I want you to be clear what do I mean by that. Now let's look at a sensory neuron. What does a sensory neuron do? It transmits messages from the sense receptors, such as the eye or the nose, to the brain or spinal cord. So please understand sensory, sensation. So they carry messages would be a wrong word, would be electrical impulses from the sense receptors. So nerve impulses from the sense organ, nerve impulses to the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. Now when you look at this structure, there's one thing which is very common in all the neurons. There's a cell body. The cell body is the part of the cell which contains the nucleus. And then the cell is thrown, if you look at this, I'm going to color it a green color. And then this part is the connection, and this is the cytoplasmic extension. And it's wrapped in a cell membrane. And then you have these different branches which you have, which are of course also the nerve. And then you have the insulation. You see, this neuron is insulated by this structure here, and in between this structure there's a little gap, and that gap is called the node of Ranvier. And this insulating material is called the myelin sheath, which is a fat layer which helps in there will be no short circuiting in the nerve, just like in electricity wiring in the house might get short circuited. So similarly, it gets short circuited in your body as well. So with the myelin sheath acts as an insulating material. So insulation. So the myelin sheath insulates, and that of course also speeds up the impulse. That is why in an insulated neuron, the speed is 100 meters per second. That's really fast. Motor neurons. Motor neurons are transmit messages from the brain and the spinal cord to muscles and glands. So you can see there's another cell body here, then there is the axon, and then there is the myelin sheath around it, and it finally goes to a muscle or a gland. Now this is a very good diagram to show you a sensory neuron, a motor neuron, and a relay neuron. Now the thing which is common to all three, number one, cell body. The part of the cell, it's a funny cell, the neuron. It's got a part which contains a nucleus, and then it's got these cytoplasmic extensions like a branching network, branching portions of the cytoplasm. And then there are the ones which are carrying impulses to the cell body, are called dendrites. So to the cell body, so the direction is like this. These are called dendrites. And then this is carrying impulses away. That's called an axon. So the axon is carrying, and this is now going to a muscle and motor. So cell body, then you can see the myelin sheath, and you can see the area where there's a gap, that's called the node of Ranvier. Now relay neuron is slightly different. It's just carrying an impulses. Cell body direction would be in this way, axon, and then the presynaptic terminal which synapses with another neuron. And then we have the sensory neuron. In the sensory neuron there will always be a receptor, and then there will be the axon, and the cell body is somewhere in the middle. So please remember, this also is the axon and this also is the axon. And then of course it will connect with either a relay neuron or directly with a motor neuron. Another diagram for you to see the sensory and the motor and the relay neuron. Now this diagram shows you the motor neuron and the sensory neuron. Now you can see here in the sensory neuron we have the cell body somewhere in the center. So the cell body is somewhere here, while the cell body is here in the motor neuron. And then this part is called the axon, then this part is called the axon, and this part is also called the axon. And then you have the muscle here in the motor neuron. So another, please pause the video here, have a look at it, draw a diagram, dendrites, cell body, axon, muscle, cell body in the center, cell body at one end. So all these things you need to be picking up and doing a little comparative analysis of sensory neuron and motor neuron. Now if you look at step-by-step reflex arc, number one, stimulus is detected by a receptor. You touch something hot, detected by temperature receptors in the skin. The receptor initiates a nerve impulse in the sensory nerve or the sensory neuron. The sensory nerve, which runs from the receptor to the spine, passes the impulse onto an interneuron or a relay neuron in the spine. The relay neuron passes the impulse, I won't like you to use the word message, impulse onto a motor nerve. The motor nerve runs from the spine to a muscle in the same limb as the receptor, passes the message onto the effector muscle. The effector muscle carries out the response in which the muscle contracts and you withdraw your hand. Like you touch something hot and you might be looking the other side, but you by mistake you touch something hot on the side and you weren't even looking that side, and you immediately withdraw your hand. Well, how does this happen? This happens very fast. The speed of an electrical impulse is 100 meters per second. So it is very, very fast, and basically all reflexes are to protect your body against damage. Because if you kept on touching that thing which was hot, you'd probably burn your hand. So immediately you touch something hot and you withdraw your hand, and that's a reflex action, and that is to protect the body against any damage. Now looking at the brain, now coming to the structure of the brain, the only important part which I've shown you in this diagram is most of the labeling is not what you need to be actually looking at. The only main part which I want you to remember is this part, which is covering nearly the entire brain, and that's called the cerebrum. It is also called the cerebral hemispheres. Why? Because it is divided in the center in a line, like if you draw a line in your hair in the middle. So it's two right and left cerebral hemispheres. So cerebrum, or you can say cerebral hemispheres. There's a B here which I missed out. Cerebrum or cerebral hemispheres. Cerebral, so it's a B here which I missed out. Cerebral hemispheres. And this whole thing would be the cerebrum, which is of course made up of all these different lobes. The frontal, the temporal, and the parietal, and the occipital. And then you have this structure, which is a very important structure, which has got a sort of a leaf-like design, and that's called the cerebellum. Cerebellum. And then of course you can see here is the spinal cord, which we're going to be talking about, and this brain stem is also called the medulla. So the medulla oblongata, this is the part of the, which is just above beginning of the spinal cord, and then of course it continues in the spinal cord. And then you have an area here which is called the hypothalamus, and then you have, this is the pituitary gland. So hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. I'm just going to show you another diagram to elaborate on this. So cerebrum or the cerebral hemispheres, cerebellum, medulla oblongata, hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. Another diagram showing you a little bit of a detail. Again, this is the main thing which I want you to understand. This is the entire cerebrum or the cerebral hemispheres. And then you can see this part is the cerebellum, which has got these sort of lines on it. And then this is the part which we call the brain stem or the medulla oblongata. So another diagram, because you can be given any diagram, and I would advise you to just write the different parts of the brain and look up the Google search and look at a number of diagrams and be able to label it. Now looking at the diagram of the brain, I have again drawn it, and I know I'm not a very good at drawing, but I've tried my level best. So cerebrum is the main part of the brain, and what does it control? Three things: memory, intelligence, reasoning ability, and A for acquired skills. Now I just want to talk a little about this. Of course, the mnemonic for this is MIRA, MIRA. Memory means that, the question which could come in your MCQ would be, a person has a head injury and now cannot remember his name or his address. Which part of the brain is affected? Well, you can see that he's lost his memory. So memory is one of the things which is controlled by the cerebrum. Then intelligence, person is very good in maths, a person is very good in arts, intelligence. Reasoning abilities, if you reason out with me and say, okay, no, miss, it's 6 in the morning, and I'm saying, well, we don't have a class at 6 in the morning, that's Fajr time. How can we have a class at 6 in the morning? So you will reason out with me, I will reason with you and say, no, it's not 6 in the morning, it's 6 in the evening, that's when we have our class. So reasoning ability. And then acquired skills. Acquired skills is something which we've learned, acquired. Like, I mean, you can write in English, I can write in Urdu, I can write in Pashto. So, acquired skills. You can ride a bike, you can drive a car. Well, all those things you've acquired. I can knit a sweater, I can knit a cap. So, acquired skills. So if I say in an MCQ that a person could read and write in German, but after the head injury he or she cannot do it. Well, where is the injury? The injury is cerebrum, because you learnt a language. You aren't born with a language. We all learn our languages as we grow up. So memory, intelligence, reasoning ability, and acquired skills. Then for cerebellum is a very simple mnemonic. It's PCB, not Pakistan Cricket Board, but P is for posture. So posture. C is for coordination. So the fact that you can walk and you can sit up and then you can jog, or you can do the parade or something, is a very coordinated activity. So coordination, posture, coordination. And B is for balance. So the fact that you can stand up straight, the fact that you can walk straight and you're not toppling all over. So posture, coordination, and balance. So P, C, B. So these are the ones which I want you to remember for cerebellum. And that's why in the hospital, in the neurology department, when a patient walks in, we immediately know he's got cerebellar damage, because the way he walks in, he's got a very funny gait. He's toppling all over, just like a drunk person. But we know then that, as soon as he walks in, and the way he walks in, usually people walk in just walking straight in. But this person is sort of going all around, he's falling all over the place, and then he walks in. So we immediately know he's got cerebellar damage. So cerebellum. Then we come to the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is a hormones. We're going to be talking about that in the hormones. It's a master gland, produces a lot of hormones. And the hypothalamus does two things. Number one, osmoregulation, which means regulates the water content, and the other is thermoregulation. So you enter this room is very cold, and all this is going to be thermoregulation. So please remember that. Hypothalamus, osmoregulation, and thermoregulation. Now let's look at the last one which we've left out, is medulla oblongata. Now the medulla oblongata, I tell you to remember it as 3 B's. You have to remember these as well. Please remember that. So one is, of course, body temperature, then heartbeat. So that's a B here. And the third is breathing rate. So the 3 B's stand for body temperature, beat or heartbeat, and breathing rate. So all these are monitored by the medulla. So that is the very, very important part of the whole central nervous system, because it is the beginning of the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord, this one which I have shading in black. So this is the spinal cord, and this is just at the nape of your neck, just a little below where is the outer edge, and this is the place where you hit. If you learn in judo, that's a place where you hit to kill somebody, and that's one of those very important strikes which you make to, if you want to kill somebody, is the medulla oblongata has to be severed. Even if it's damaged, well, that's it, done, you're dead. So body temperature, heartbeat, and breathing rate. So medulla oblongata has a very important and a very, very important role to play in maintaining. So you might be saying, okay, thermoregulation here was hypothalamus as well. Yes, here also, here we have again thermoregulation. Then controlling your heartbeat, you exercising, your heartbeat goes more, faster. You sleeping, your heartbeat is lesser. Breathing rate, it goes up. You're exercising, you're on the treadmill, your breathing rate is faster, deeper breathing. You're sleeping much slower and much less deeper, or less. It's not large volumes breathed in and breathed out. So that is all what I want to discuss about the different parts of the brain and its functions. Another quick overview of the parts of the brain: cerebral cortex, conscious intelligence, memory, language. Thermoregulatory center, the hypothalamus, monitors blood temperature. Cerebellum, muscle coordination. Spinal cord. Medulla, unconscious activity, breathing, heartbeat. So just an overview, and of course after what I've done with you, and then we go on to this also, so it just helps you to comprehend, and I want you to be able to label the different parts very, very clearly. Now in this video we have covered this is the video 1. So this is the first video on this chapter, and we have covered the central nervous system and the reflex action and the different parts of the brain and their functions. So this should be the beginning of this chapter, and this should help you build up on this chapter as we go along. Thank you.